It was our third thunderstorm of the week. The kids were stuck inside, and the power was flickering again. I was a junior counselor at Camp Woodley. It was a small place in upstate New York. We had old cabins, a mossy lake, and more mosquito bites than memories. When I volunteered to grab some flashlights from a storage shed, I took a shortcut. Instead of following the main trail, I cut behind the rec hall, through the woods. The rain let up, and that's when I saw it. A building. Small, old, and hidden behind a wall of pine trees near the lake's far edge. It wasn't on the camp map. Neither was it mentioned in training, but it looked like a cabin. And not just any cabin. It still had bunk beds inside. The screen door creaked louder than it should have. Inside, the air smelled like rot and wet wool. There were 6 bunks, all made up with dusty bedding. Name tags still taped to the wooden posts. Rusty footlockers, and an old Camp Woodley banner, all yellowed and brittle. I stepped over a mouse-chewed backpack and found a stack of Polaroid photos tucked behind a bed frame. They were from 1978. Group shots of kids smiling. One photo showed them lined up in front of this exact cabin. There were 6 of them, all boys. But something felt wrong. Back at the main lodge, I asked the head counselor if she knew about the old cabin near Lake Briar. She went pale. "We demolished that place in the 80s, she said. "It's not there anymore." I didn't tell her about the photos. Not yet, at least. That night, I borrowed the camp van and drove into town, just to think. On a whim, I stopped at the little film shop by the diner and asked the guy if he could develop old Polaroids. He looked at the photo I brought and nodded. "Sure, this film's ancient, but I'll give it a shot." When I came back an hour later, he handed me a set of prints. The first few were what I expected. Kids in 70s shorts and counselors smiling. But one made my stomach twist. It was a picture of this year's campers. The same group I had just been supervising. Same kids. Same faces. All standing in front of the cabin. I checked the date on the back. It said June 12th, 2023. That was 5 days before they arrived at camp. And then I saw him. A 7th boy. Standing in the back. I didn't recognize him, but his name was on one of the bunks at the old cabin. Eli W. I went back to the cabin the next morning. The sun was out. The birds chirping. Like nothing had happened. The screen door was shut, but there were footprints in the dirt. Small, fresh footprints. When I opened the door, 5 of the 6 beds were bare, except one. The one labeled Eli W. It was made and tidy, like someone was still staying there. There was a folded piece of paper on the pillow. I opened it. It just said, "I told them not to come back. Now I have to stay again." I turned around, but the cabin was empty. Later that night, one of the campers asked if the lake ever had more cabins. "Why?" I asked. He then said, "Because last night, someone knocked on our window and asked for his old bunk back." I've worked summers at Camp Timberloop for 6 years. Same pine trees, same mosquito bites, same goofy songs around the fire pit. But this year, something was different. The kids were scared. Not like fake scared from ghost stories. It was real fear. Quiet and lingering. It started with whispers. "Did you hear that story last night? About the boy in the woods? The man told it to us while you were asleep." I thought they were making it up, until I asked who the man was. They all said the same thing. "He doesn't wear a name tag, but he knows all our names." The kids said he visits different cabins after lights out, sits by the foot of their beds and whisper creepy stories about the woods and about kids who never left. One story ended with this line, "You'll see it for yourself soon." I asked them if they remembered his face. Every single one said no. "He sits in the dark. We just listen." I thought maybe it was a prank, another counselor messing with them. But when I brought it up at the staff meeting, everyone just stared at me. No one's been on night rotation this week, the camp director said. Not since the rainstorm knocked out the trail lights. Then a junior counselor, Becca, said something that froze me. This happened in the 90s, too, she said quietly. My dad went here. He said they called him the campfire counselor. Becca and I dug through the archives in the messy hall attic. There were old logbooks and journals from decades past. We found a counselor's notebook dated July 1987. The last few entries described campers waking up scared, claiming someone sat at the foot of their beds and told them stories. One described the same phrase, "You'll see it for yourself soon." The final entry chilled me. He chooses one to stay. Every time. Below that, taped to the page, was a blurry Polaroid of a boy sitting alone by a campfire, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he'd been caught listening to someone speak. But the strangest thing? There was no second figure in the photo, just a long shadow, stretching behind him into the trees. That night, I stayed in cabin 7, pretended to sleep, and waited. At 2:14 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. The door creaked open. I didn't see him, but the air grew thick, like the space itself was heavier, and a voice whispered, "You're not supposed to hear this." I sat up and snapped on my flashlight. No one was there, just the kids asleep, and one empty bed. The next morning, we did a head count. One camper, Oliver, was gone, his sleeping bag still neatly folded. We searched all day. Nothing. But later, on the side of the fire pit log, I noticed something etched into the wood. A new name. Not carved, but burned in that red. Oliver, 2024. Just like the others in the ring. Camp Sycamore was closing for good. They said it was budget cuts. But everyone knew the real reason. 5 years ago, a kid named Jordan drowned in the lake. They called it an accident, but my family never believed that. Jordan was my older brother. I hadn't been back to Camp Sycamore since it happened. But when they opened up one last summer for returning campers, I signed up. I had to see it for myself. The cabins were smaller than I remembered. The lake was still, like it was holding its breath. And behind cabin 6, the old sycamore tree was still standing. Its bark looked blackened and scarred, like it had been burned. But that night, when the fireflies were out and the campfire cracked, I heard someone whisper my name from that tree. I waited until lights out. Then I grabbed my flashlight and went behind cabin 6. The tree looked even darker up close. The bark was leaking thick, dark sap that smelled like iron. I started digging near the base, half remembering a story Jordan once told me. "There's a time capsule," he said years ago, "buried under the sycamore." About 2 feet down, I hit metal. A rusted lunchbox. Inside was a faded Polaroid, 2 friendship bracelets, and a tiny cassette recorder. It was labeled in Jordan's handwriting, "Play this if I don't come back." I snuck into the Art's cabin, where they still had an old tape player. When I hit play, static filled the room. Then his voice, "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out." He sounded terrified. He talked about a game the older campers dared him to play. It wasn't in the handbook. It wasn't even really a game. They called it the circle. You sit around the sycamore, close your eyes, and repeat, "If you're the one the woods have picked, let the bark remember me." He said he played. He heard the tree groan. And then something whispered back. It said, "You're chosen." Then the tape cut out. That night was the end of Camp Bonfire. Everyone was laughing and singing. But I couldn't stop thinking about Jordan's tape. I went back to the tree. There was a ring of stones I hadn't noticed before. They were small and mossy, all arranged in a circle around the sycamore. In the dirt, I saw faint initials carved beside each stone. Old names and dates. Every 5 years. Always one. The last one said Jordan, 2019. And beside it, a new stone, with space for another name. That night, the fire pit went out early. The counselors couldn't find one of the campers. They called his name until dawn, but I already knew where he was. When I checked the sycamore the next morning, the new stone had been marked with the name Ethan, 2024. And in the dirt, just beneath it, carved in tiny shaking letters with words, "It wasn't supposed to be me."